Salutations, fellow nerds. I'm Rick Y, the Wise Guy, and today is January 21st, 2025. The inauguration is done, and within the immediate aftermath, Donald Trump proved me wrong by actually signing in a slew of horrible policies and slashing those that already existed. On top of that, Trump appears to have betrayed his intentions in the coming months and years through an act that was both alarming and luckily futile. So if you're into news, history, or just humorous American hogwash, sit a spell. Take your shoes off. If one thing is very evident about this second term, it is that Donald Trump is trying desperately to portray an undemocratic strongman. While so many of his followers were trying desperately to hide it, Elon Musk made it all too clear who we are dealing with. He gave the Nazi salute to cheering crowds, turned and then gave it to the American flag. Instead of finding the same horror in it that they did when any liberal happens to burn one in protest, MAGA and conservatives are excusing or outright laughing at it. They find it funny. They call it trolling. I want to make sure I'm super clear when I say that this is Nazi sympathizing. I know there are a bunch of white dudes out there who just can't fathom the pain that their political movement is causing, and it's mostly because they don't want to know. They're not interested in empathizing. But there are others who are just doing all of it intentionally but don't have the courage to stand up for those beliefs. To those, I say, we see you. We have to. You've become the person we keep at arm's length for decades to come, and you're going to wonder why. I'm telling you why right now. Save this video in your memory if it happens to be historically short. Some of the shit that Trump accomplished yesterday was freeing 1,500 cop beaters and insurrectionists who violently stormed our Capitol. While lying to his followers and saying that he would only go after the people who hadn't done anything violent, he seems to have forgotten that fact and pardoned all of them. The leaders of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers white nationalist groups have been released from prison. To those of you unfamiliar with the history of 1930s Germany, you sincerely need to try and familiarize yourself. History doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. He also all but came out to declare that he will implement tariffs across the board on Canada and Mexico February 1st. Now, usually when tariffs are implemented, it takes upwards of a year to see the actual results. That said, hopefully we can use that to try and work on whatever it is we need this year, because we are at the precipice of a trade war. Gas and building materials are going to skyrocket, and so too will most, if not all, produce. If you aren't familiar with how tariffs work, even in this late part of the game, I will try to link one of my videos going over how they work in the comments below. Other countries don't pay tariffs. You pay tariffs. If you get anything that is currently relying upon any form of import from either of those countries, expect to see those prices go up. And those egg prices were caused by avian flu. Contrary to popular belief, the president doesn't lay eggs. To make matters worse, an avian flu outbreak has actually just occurred in Georgia, and poultry sales have halted. Can we blame Trump now? No? Right? Because that would be a tremendously illogical straw man on my part. Right? He also ended Biden executive orders, making Medicare and Medicaid prices more affordable. So if you know anyone who depends on those, reach out and ask them to find out how much they'll be spending, and make sure they thank Donald Trump for having done it to them. Moving on, Trump also tried to create an executive order that would have ended birthright citizenship. To my conservative buddies out there, when an executive tries to consolidate power to overrule an established constitution, that's the polar opposite of small government. Not to mention, a change like that would require 2/3 majority vote in the House and Senate and in the states. To those of you who are kind of worried about it, don't worry. He's got a long hurdle. All it takes is one federal judge to throw in some kind of legal challenge to kind of reverse all of that. But if you weren't aware that presidents can't unilaterally stop constitutional amendments, why the hell don't you think Democrat presidents haven't come out to take your guns yet? It's because it's called big government executive overreach. And I know you think this helps you right now, and for that you're willing to excuse it and move your goalposts, but it doesn't. If birthright citizenship ends, none of us are ever safe from deportation for any reason whatsoever. Now, before you go on cheering because it doesn't currently apply to you, let me ask you what happens if an actually corrupt-ass Democrat gets into office and starts deporting anybody who owns a rebel flag because they're suddenly deemed a threat to national security. You see, These things can go both ways, and short-sighted Schadenfreude is not a viable way to dictate government policy. If that's your interests, on behalf of everybody, stay the fuck out of politics. He also got us out of the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization, putting us on the same footing as the world's worst polluters and sickest countries globally. He also ousted the first female Coast Guard commandant. She was relieved of her duties this morning after having been granted the title of the first female to lead a military branch. Meanwhile, an advocate for January 6th defendants has been appointed U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., and he will be supervising requests to dismiss January 6th cases. Congratulations, MAGA. You've absolved members of a rebellion against the government. Interestingly, Trump vowed a revolution of common sense, which are words people use when they can't back up their reasoning with logic or evidence. It's akin to the term faith. One would assume common sense would tell people that Donald Trump was a coiled snake in the grass, but here we are. One thing he did was designate Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations, which may sound great on paper, but what happens when we start using that to justify invading Mexico after Trump declares that they're a state sponsor of terror? He is also ordering all government workers back to the office and ending DEI initiatives federally. A lot of folks are about to lose their jobs. I don't know who needs to hear this, but what the fuck did we say was going to happen? How many of you actually sat back and said that, you wasn't going to do any of this? And here it is, second day, and he's full steam ahead on all of his worst ideas. I would say that I hope y'all remember this, but since we're all going through a second term of Donald Trump, it's clear too few of you chose to learn your lesson the first time. You get what you paid for. Contractors, get your shit together now. Work is about to dry up in about a year when Americans can't afford building materials and your prices have to go up as well. I'm going to try and keep everybody up to speed with these new executive orders and stuff, but to be quite frank, it's difficult. He's firing experts to fill with loyalists and implementing all of his immigration and economic policies. As much as I hate to say it, Project 2025 has officially begun. Stay safe and stay sane. I know this is stressful, but our future depends on your involvement. It's evident now that too many of those who are working to change the United States are doing so for the worse. The people of the nation and indeed the world depend on you now, whether you like it or not. We no longer have the luxury of having the option. So I invite you to join me while we all stay informed, stay engaged, and stay decent. Y'all come back now. You hear?